BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Andrew Petrie. This is the Scottish Football Podcast, and given it's the Grand National tomorrow, we're looking ahead to the penultimate jump for the Premiership's final straight.
I think that was the complete performance. Can't ask for any more in terms of the performance, the result, 3 goals, 3 points and a clean sheet. So all in all, fantastic day's work, and I think fully deserve it for the performance.
Yes, it's matchday 32 in the nation's top flight, and the big match is in Glasgow as Hibs' unbelievable unbeaten run faces a sturdy challenge. David Gray's side travel to Ibrox on Saturday.
A really disappointing afternoon. I apologise to supporters for that. It's not good enough. They should expect better for the team.
What I'm not satisfied and what is not okay for me is the last 15 minutes. We give up.
With only a point between Kilmarnock and Dundee, can Killie shake off the relegation fears to beat fellow strugglers Motherwell? And of course, it all kicks off at Tannadice.
We can't go into these games fearing it. I think 100% we can go and compete on the pitch, and obviously we'll be going for the win. That's what we want to do as Scotland as a nation.
Where Scotland take on Germany in the Nations League.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Well, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by former St Mirren, Hibs and Kilmarnock midfielder Stephen McGinn and Scotland's all-time record appearance maker Gemma. Guys, let's just get straight into it. We'll start at Ibrox, Hibs against Rangers. The Hibees haven't won at Ibrox since 2018. How big a task is ahead of them? Or is this perhaps their best chance since that day to pick up a victory in Glasgow?
I'd say yes. Rangers, they haven't won at home in 4 games. So, and to be honest, it depends what Rangers you get. For the neutral, if you get the Rangers that played against Dundee last week, it'll be a cracking game. For a Rangers fan, I'm not sure I want that. I'd probably love just a little bit of consistency. Maybe they wouldn't though, maybe they're enjoying the ride. But for Hibs, just a phenomenal run. And if they're going to break that up any time, then on the back of a 15-game unbeaten run, it's probably the time that you would back them.
And that's it, Stephen. I suppose Rangers are, like Gemma said, staring down the barrel of potentially a 5th consecutive home defeat, although that last defeat was a bit of a strange one because they ended up winning the tie on penalties. Neil McCann says Barry Ferguson's done enough to prove that he's suitable for the role permanently. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it was very hard to tell if the takeover happens, what they're looking for. As things stand with the current board, he's probably got as good a chance as anyone of getting the job. I think looking at the game, I think the only time we can predict what Rangers will turn up is next Thursday against Bilbao. I've watched a lot of Hibs. Dave Gray, I think, has built a team, organised a side very much like the last Hibs team that finished 3rd. I mean, they're really well organised, really hard to beat, don't give much away. And they're unbeaten in a long time in the league. And it's as good a chance as any going to Ibrox a winning. I think they can go there and not lose. I think they've got enough about them. I think Rocky Bashiri's in the form of his life. Players throughout the team. I think they've got assets back in the team. I think they're in a really good place, and I think why not? Why not the time to break the duck?
And Gemma, you mentioned the kind of inconsistency that Rangers have had. They've conceded 2 or more goals in each of their past 5 league games, 11 conceded in total. In their entire history, only from December 1893 to April 1894 have they ever conceded twice or more in 6 successive league fixtures. That's basically a very long-winded way of saying they've got a very leaky defence. How does Barry Ferguson fix that? And does Jack Butland maybe play into that? Does he maybe need to be dropped?
I'm just still getting through all those numbers you just chucked at me, Andrew. What do you think you're playing at?
It's a little early in the morning for that, I'll admit.
So you're saying they keep losing goals,
yeah,
and they should stop doing that.
Yeah.
You can look at defence. That's their primary task, but you can also look at the whole team and how they transition into defence. Because at times I think that's where they lack a little bit. And if you listen to Barry Ferguson's comments after the match, his comment was, in the first half, we were nowhere near it. And that's not specifically one player. I think that's the whole team. So in terms of the whole team's reaction to when they transition to defence can be a bit slack at times, which gives the opposition time and space. Yes, Jack Butland has struggled a little bit in some games. I think he's probably what he has done previously for Rangers is he's got money in the bank there, which is the reason why they're maintaining him in that position. And look, if Alan McGregor, and I'm pretty sure he wouldn't be shy in coming forward to say whether or not he thinks that it's time for him to have a rest. As a goalkeeper, it's difficult because he'll come up with some big saves and then all of a sudden people will think you should be holding this and you should be doing that. I look at it slightly different in that when I look at some of the saves that Jack Butland's made, yes, there's obvious ones where you're thinking that has to be better, like that's just a mistake. There's other ones when you look at what's happening around him and his body position, and you're thinking that's really difficult for him to do that. So I think, look, they've Jack Butland is their number one. I think he'll remain their number one, unless there's something that is blatantly obvious that he's done wrong, which is cost Rangers. Because I don't think it's all down to Jack Butland at this moment in time.
Oh, there's the goalkeepers union.
I knew that was coming. That was obvious, wasn't it? I know.
No, I agree. I think you look back at the game against Hearts that they ended up winning under Philippe Clement at Tynecastle, the game Jack Butland had then. We all saw and were maybe reminded of what he is capable of, and I'm sure
it's just more obvious. It's more obvious when a goalkeeper does it. Like, striker can miss, Dessers can miss a whole barrel, but he scores their world in, and then all of a sudden Dessers is back. It's just the way it goes. But unless he's consistently in poor form, which I don't think he is consistently in poor form, he has the odd mistake here and there, I think he'll still remain.
Absolutely. Going back to Hibs, Stephen, bottom of the league on the 14th of December, now third after a 15-game unbeaten run. The longest unbeaten run within a single season in the top flight in the 21st century outside the old firm clubs. That's just a mad statistic. What is it? Is there anything specific that David Gray has changed? And how hard is it for that mentality to switch between, from one end of the spectrum to the other?
I mean, obviously, I think at the start of the season, when Dave Gray got the job permanent, I think he built his team thinking we were going to be four at the back when he has two wingers, like Ellie and try and get the best out of him with Martin Boyle on the other side. It wasn't working. He was under a lot of pressure and he kept his head. He got his 11. What was the best way of getting the best out of this 11? He moved to the kind of three at the back with the two wing backs, two Gadden brothers. Nicky in particular really grabbed it by the scruff of the neck, but I think it just complements all of the team. I think Rocky Bashiri is really comfortable in the middle of the three, almost plays as an old-fashioned sweeper. Triantes has really come into his own in the middle, and they've almost at times have played with the false strikers, especially early on when they were kind of regaining confidence, and really just built within it. Even when you're missing a club captain, Joe Newell, Nicky Cadden's going out with injury, it looks seamless, the change. He's just got it to a level that everyone knows their jobs, what's required, and there's some really big individual performances amongst it.
Well, certainly Ibrox will be an interesting place to be looking at on Saturday at 3 o'clock. Let's have a look at some of the other matches at that time. Aberdeen are away to Ross County. Staggies haven't won consecutive games against Aberdeen for a long time, but they've got quite a good record up in Dingwall. This season, though, on the road, not the best. Won just one of their last 12. Where do you see it going, Gemma?
If Aberdeen can take what they did against Motherwell into this game, and if we get a repeat of the Ross County versus Dundee United game, which nobody wants ever, I could see Aberdeen taking something from this one. I've just got a sneaky suspicion about this game. I think Aberdeen have turned a slight corner. We've seen it recently. Ross County is still mathematically in a chance of getting that sixth spot, so they'll have that bit between their teeth. Yeah, but I don't know. I've got a sneaky suspicion that Jimmy Thielen's team might take something from this. However, in the last three podcasts, I've been completely wrong about everything. So given this is Grand National Weekend, and folk like a flutter, do the opposite of what I say, and you might be in my chance.
Well, some very sage betting advice there from you, Gemma. Well, that's it. You kind of mentioned they might have turned the corner. I think they've had a pretty good record of late. In the last 8 games, they've only lost once, although that was a really heavy defeat to Celtic. Stephen, has there been a kind of new formula that Jimmy Tilleen's found?
I mean, it's probably been the weirdest season of Aberdeen fans' recent history in terms of what to make of it. Even a couple of weeks ago at McDermott Park, you're walking away from that game thinking, I'm just not sure this Aberdeen team can get third. I'm not sure it's got enough to get it over the line. Then they go out and blow Motherwell away last week, and you start to get excited a bit again, thinking, we're back. It's obviously a really interesting game. First time they met up in Dingwall with Kevin Nisbet's late winner, the scenes behind the goal. So it's just one of those games. It's not a good pitch. It's a really hard place to go. It's a hard team. Don Cowy's built a really good team, really organised team, with having to lose players again this summer, go again. It's just one of those games that if you're going to finish third as an Aberdeen player, fan, manager, you have to just dig out 3 points.
And Gemma, you mentioned that game last weekend between Ross County and Dundee United. It was one of the tougher watches.
It was really boring. Let's be honest.
I'll let you say that.
I think Ross County fans and Dundee United fans, like when the camera cut to some Dundee United fans in the stand, it was just like, why am I here? It was. I mean, they got the result. That's what you want, but it was a really boring game of football. Pitch played a part in that a little bit.
Well, I was going to say against Hearts in the 2-0 loss, I think the week previously, they also they were a bit of a shadow of themselves from what they've seen this season. Is it a case of they've maybe just run out of steam a little bit? You mentioned the top 6, but they're only 4 points ahead of Dundee in the relegation playoffs.
Yeah, but as we talked about with Don Cowy, he's really built a good squad out of not a lot. He doesn't have a huge amount of resources. He's done a really good job with the resources that he's got up there, and I think I do in terms of the runners and riders that are involved for the top 6. They're at the bottom. I think they've got 0.99% of a chance of getting it, but Don doesn't ever give up, and his teams don't ever give up. So I think there's been moments in the season that Ross County, you look at them, you think they're in trouble, then all of a sudden they go on this like amazing little winning streak away from home, and they haven't won away from home in like 45 billion years, and then all of a sudden they do 3 or 4 in a row. So I would never write off Ross County. I wouldn't ever write off Ross County, but the game was boring last week.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It was pretty boring. You speak of managers who don't give up. One who certainly doesn't is Derek McInnes, but he is under pressure. Kilmarnock are winless in their last 5. The natives are a little bit restless. The squad finished 4th last season, and now they're flirting with that relegation playoff place. Stephen, can you understand their frustration a wee bit?
Yeah, I can understand. I mean, obviously, only a couple of years ago I was there. I'm going to go down to that game at the weekend, obviously, with Paul's being the captain at Motherwell, but also my wee boy's obsessed with Kilmarnock off the YouTube video winning the league, so I'm going to take him down. I'm really interested to watch it because I've done a lot of Kilmarnock games this year, and at times some of the performances have been top level Derek McInnes Kilmarnock. Obviously, a different animal at home over the piece are always a really good side. I think it's massive for them if they can have Stuart Finlay and Kyle Vassell back out there. Whether they're fully fit or not, I think for the team, for the identity of how they play, what they are, I think it would be massive for them. And you just, the thought of even discussing the relegation playoff in Kilmarnock at the start of the season with the highs of Europe and the manager they have, the players they have, it seemed unthinkable, but it shows you the competitiveness of the league, how difficult it is to roll it out and have a good season year in, year out, because they have come off the boil for whatever reason, injuries, suspensions, I'm not sure, but I expect Mark to be closer to a Derek McInnes team, absolutely, than they were last week.
Well, a man who Derek McInnes knows well is obviously Tony Docherty. He's copping a fair bit of heat as well from Dundee fans after a similarly disappointing season. Gemma, of the performances in the last 2 games, a huge derby win and then a high-scoring defeat against Rangers, has that given enough for Dundee fans? Has it given them reasons to believe?
I think the problem with Dundee hasn't been their ability to score goals or entertain, because I actually think they've shown that throughout the season, even with like key players leaving, etc. The problem with Dundee is defensively, and I think from a Dundee fan perspective, I would be looking at that team attacking wise and saying, why are we not challenging for the top six? Why are we not further up there? Because we play attractive football. He did some good business in the loan market with the players that he bought in. But you then go to the opposite end and you look at their goals conceded and the types of goals they're conceding, and that their season in terms of defensively, there was a microcosm of it against Rangers. Like the goals that they lost against Rangers is just Dundee's defensive season in a nutshell, which is completely avoidable. Tony talk about lack of consistency in that defensive area, etc., which I get. But then the question has to be asked, if you're relying on Joe Shaughnessy's been talked about a lot, you're relying on one person to provide that consistency, then there's a problem in the recruitment in that space. So I can understand why Dundee fans are grumpy. I'll say that. I'd be grumpy as well if I was a Dundee fan. But ultimately, there's like three parts to a game. There's attack, there's transition, and there's defence. And when they're failing in one of those fundamental bits, it's going to be really difficult to win football matches. And when your defensive record is you've let in 31 goals conceded, and the only other two teams are the one that's sitting below you and the one that's sitting above you, like the stats don't lie.
And I'm sure, as I've spoken to Cammy Bell about this, changing goalkeepers most weeks probably doesn't help massively either for their confidence.
No, and there's a little bit of a theme. You look at Kelly, they've been changing O'Hara and McCrory about as well. It's difficult because with the goalkeeping situation, as with anything, consistency is key, and it's not just for the goalkeeper, because the way it's a fundamental part of that backline unit. So how you communicate with your defensive unit, how you even some goalkeepers will have a different way in which they come for crosses or deal with crosses. That creates confusion, and if you're changing that in, week out, it provides a level of uncertainty before you've even kicked a ball. I understand why managers do it, in terms of perhaps that will provide a little shot in the arm for team, etc. But when it doesn't work out, it then just looks like it's a bit of a panic move.
Talking about Gemma saying grumpy, probably the hot topic this week's been this size of league. 10 team, 12 team, 14, 16 team. Is Dundee's problem being too cavaliers in a really tight league where they're too exciting to watch? Do you know what I mean? Is that because if we're sitting in a 16 team league and they're scoring 4 at Tannadice and then scoring 3 at Rangers, and there's 6 then 7 goals in their game, is it just because of the league? You play that way and you're leaking, then all of a sudden you're into a relegation playoff. Does more games look like that if we're in a 14 team league, a 16 team league, where there's that kind of less strain of are teams happier to be 10th out of a 16 team league if they're watching 6 and 7 goals back to back? I
think it's a really interesting question, because your answer is probably more teams would play more attractive football because there's less fear that you're going to get relegated out of that. And then the other part of me, which is my day job, goes to it's not about the money until it's about the money. And as soon as you widen that, the pot becomes less for more. So ultimately, the decision that will be made here, in my belief, this won't be a footballing decision, this will be a financial decision. That's what it's going to come down to. And we can put all the footballing arguments on the table that why we think it's a good idea and why we think it will promote better football matches, more entertaining football matches, capture more fans, etc., engage more fans. But you can be guaranteed, if the balance sheet doesn't stack up on this one and it doesn't show that it'll promote greater investment into the game, I don't think it'll happen. And that's a sad reality.
Yeah, well, the league reconstruction, I'm sure, will be talked about on Saturday. Of course, we'll have updates from all those games on Sportsound. Saturday, of course, really starts at 12 o'clock with off the ball. Finally, for those games, guys, Killie welcome Motherwell on Saturday. Dundee host St Mirren at the same time. Of those two visitors, so Motherwell and St Mirren, who do you think will have added more strength to their top 6 bid by the end of the weekend?
Those are really two interesting matches. I'm going to say you should say St Mirren, but I think Dundee will have a reaction to that game against Rangers. Maybe Motherwell. Kelly really struggling at home compared to last season. So maybe Motherwell, but only if he gets a reaction from what he said, which you'd imagine he would.
Yeah, Stephen, just quickly, what did you think of that? Michael Wimmer saying that the last 15 minutes of the game against Aberdeen were unacceptable.
Yeah, probably been there when a game's gone and it can almost peter out and you're thinking, just end this. You're almost the ref's putting up the board and it's going from 4 minutes going on another 4 minutes at that. So it might just have been that, but Michael Wimmer's probably still trying to get across his personality, what he's exactly looking for in a team. And he's probably still setting standards in terms of, look, if you want to be a part of this next year, I need to cut the squad size. We need to be better. Next year, you're going to have to fight every day into the 95th minute, 4-1 up, 4-1 down. I think he's just still setting standards, and I think he used the media to kind of get across those standards again, reinforce them to his players.
We'll see if that has the desired effect. Now, on to Tannadice, where Scotland hosts Germany in the Nations League. We'll get the most obvious question out of the way. Gemma, how tough is this one going to be for Scotland?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. We think back to the game they had against the Netherlands, where they spent most of the game without the ball. They scored in that game, which was fantastic, but I think that Netherlands were particularly wasteful. And I think it will be similar. That being said, I've watched the highlights of the Germans versus Austria, and in the first 25 minutes or something, Austria took the lead, and the Germans were nervy, but they came through that 4-1. I suspect it'll be a similar game to the Netherlands. Michael McGinn, the interim head coach, has said as much. Got to be comfortable in terms of controlling the game without the ball. Work really hard to do that. I do see this. In anything other than a German victory is success for Scotland.
And you mentioned that game against the Netherlands, a 2-1 loss, when I think it would be fair to say most of us expected it to be a little bit heavier than that. How has Michael McArdle done so far, and is he in contention for this role full time?
So we all expect it to be heavier, and I'll go back to the point that it probably should have been more. If you look at the stats, if you look at the opportunities that the Netherlands had, they absolutely bombarded the Scotland goal and they were just wasteful. That being said, Scotland created opportunities up the other end. Emma Lawton getting her first goal for Scotland, well deserved, and they had other chances. So I think the fact that I don't think we should look at the scoreline and think we thought it'd be a lot more. On the night, it still could have played out to be a lot more. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't the game. The game wasn't a 2-1 game. So I think there's a little bit. People are getting a little bit carried away with that. And I don't mean that in the negative sense. I mean that, let's be realistic. Look, Michael McArdle, he's made some significant changes. He's left out some familiar faces. He's promoted a lot of his kind of under-23 players into the squad. Against Austria, it absolutely did not work. Against Holland, the Netherlands, it worked in the sense that there was, they did well out, not with the ball. But that being said, this is a Scotland team that we want to compete with the Netherlands. This is a Scotland team that we want to be in that A group because we want to be showing what we can do. He's got Erin Cuthbert back in, and she's probably in the form of her life, so that's going to be positive. Do I think he's in the running for the job? No, I don't. I don't think he is. I think that in the future that's a place that he'd love to be in. But I don't think it's him this time round. But once again, I could be completely wrong.
Well, we'll have to wait and stay tuned for that. Of course, we also had the news yesterday that Scotland will co-host the Women's World Cup in 2035, all things being good. How did you react to that news, and how excited should we all be? I don't think we know if it means automatic qualification just yet.
No, we hope it means automatic qualification. Look, I think that a woman who's well known in the Scottish women's football sphere, Sheila Begbie, tried to get the SFA to host the Euros 20 years ago. So I'm glad we finally put in expression of interest with the UK and Ireland. I think it's a fantastic opportunity. What's that, another 5 years down the road, and women's football will just be on another level there again. So it's an amazing opportunity. Hopefully it means automatic qualification. If not, then the prize of playing a World Cup and a match at Hampden should be motivation enough for anyone. But for the game in this country, I think it's huge, as long as we capitalise on it. We've not been very good at doing that in the past, and hopefully we've got the opportunity to do it now.
Hopefully we do. Right, that's all we've got time for today. Many thanks to Stephen McGinn and Gemma Fay for joining me. Remember, we're here with new episodes bright and early every day, so make sure you don't miss out by subscribing on BBC Sounds with push notifications turned on to alert you to every new show. All that remains is to thank you for listening. Goodbye.
On BBC Sounds. From life aboard a Russian submarine to chairman of Hearts Football Club.
At this stage, he was the hero.
But as his controversial decisions escalated...
They said, we're going to sack George. And I'm going, you can't do this.
How did Vladimir Romanov go from Hearts saviour to a wanted man?
They caused a whole load of chaos and havoc.
Romanov, Tsar of Hearts. Listen now on BBC Sounds.